My straight best friend vanished after graduation. 10 years later, he bought the house next door. Hello everyone, and welcome back. If you enjoy emotional gay love stories with romance, powerful twists, and unforgettable endings, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. And before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love seeing viewers from all over the world. Thank you for being here. Now let's dive into today's story. The last person I expected to see moving into the house next door was the man I'd spent 10 years teaching myself to forget. I was standing barefoot in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold, when the moving truck backed into the driveway beside mine. At first, I barely looked. The house had been empty for 6 months, and watching strangers carry furniture wasn't exactly how Ethan Parker planned to spend his weekend. Then a dark blue pickup rolled up behind the truck. The driver's door opened, and my coffee mug slipped half an inch through my fingers before I caught it. Mason Hayes stepped onto the driveway. For one stupid second, my brain refused to recognize him. 10 years had changed the details. His hair was shorter. His shoulders were broader beneath a faded gray t-shirt. There were faint lines beside his eyes that hadn't existed when we were 18. But some people live in your memory so long that recognition happens before thought. My chest knew him first. Then my brain caught up and immediately requested an emergency evacuation. Mason, my best friend from high school. My almost everything. The boy who had disappeared after graduation and turned 10 years of friendship into 10 years of silence. I hadn't seen him since June 2016. Not at reunions. Not during holidays. Not even accidentally online. Because after approximately 3 months of pathetic late-night profile checking, I'd blocked him for what I called emotional maturity and what my sister called self-preservation. And now he was 20 feet from my kitchen window carrying a cardboard box labeled books. I stepped backward. This was ridiculous. I was 28 years old. I paid property taxes. I scheduled dentist appointments without my mother reminding me. I could survive seeing an old friend. Then Mason laughed at something one of the movers said, and suddenly I was 18 again, sitting beside him on the hood of his beat-up Ford beneath a summer sky, pretending my heart wasn't doing dangerous things whenever he smiled at me. Nope, absolutely not. I turned away from the window. The universe could keep its aggressively unsubtle symbolism. 10 years ago, Mason had left. Today, apparently, he had returned with furniture. I made it 3 steps toward the hallway before curiosity betrayed every principle I'd developed in adulthood. I looked back. Mason had stopped beside the truck. He wasn't talking anymore. He was staring directly at my house, directly at my window, directly at me. Neither of us moved. The distance between our houses couldn't have been more than 30 feet, but somehow 10 years fit perfectly inside it. Then Mason smiled. Not the polite smile you give someone you vaguely remember. The old one. Small, crooked, familiar enough to hurt. He lifted one hand. My stomach dropped. And through the open kitchen window, I heard him say the nickname nobody had called me since high school. Hey, F. I forgot how breathing worked. Because Mason didn't look surprised to see me. Not even a little. And that was when I understood the part that scared me more than his return. Mason Hayes hadn't accidentally moved next door to me. He already knew exactly where I lived. I ducked away from the window so quickly that my coffee sloshed over the rim and landed on my hand, which felt appropriate. Apparently, adulthood had prepared me for taxes, deadlines, and clogged gutters, but not for Mason Hayes saying 2 syllables through an open window. F. Nobody called me that anymore. Nobody was allowed to. I grabbed a dish towel and wiped the counter while pretending my pulse had not suddenly remembered high school. The problem with Mason was that remembering him never happened one memory at a time. It came as a flood. Mason at 14, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor while we argued over which movie to watch. Mason at 16, walking into my parents' kitchen without knocking because my mother had stopped considering him a guest years earlier. Mason at 17, stealing fries from my plate and insisting food tasted better when it belonged to someone else. By senior year, he had a key to our house. Mom automatically made an extra serving at dinner. His sneakers lived beside mine, near the back door often enough that my father once joked we should start charging him rent. We were best friends. That explanation worked perfectly for everyone except me. Somewhere between sophomore year and graduation, friendship had become something more complicated inside my chest. I never told him. Mason dated girls. Pretty girls. Confident girls who wore his varsity jacket and knew exactly where they belonged beside him. I became extremely talented at smiling through it. Besides, Mason never gave me anything concrete enough to justify hope. There were only moments. Small, dangerous moments. His hand resting briefly on the back of my neck when he passed behind me. The nights he stayed over, and we talked until 2 in the morning because neither of us wanted to sleep. The way he could find me across a crowded hallway without seeming to look. Normal best friend things, I told myself. Completely normal. My favorite lie. One memory returned sharper than the others. 3 weeks before graduation, we had been sitting in his old Ford outside my house with the windows down and warm May air drifting through the cab. Neither of us seemed willing to open a door. Mason had stared through the windshield for a long time before saying, "Promise me something." I had laughed because seriousness made me nervous around him. "That depends. Are you asking for a kidney?" He had not laughed. "Promise we do not become strangers after graduation." I remembered looking at him then, really looking, and thinking that becoming strangers was impossible. Mason knew how I took my coffee. He knew I hated cilantro and loved terrible mystery novels. He knew when I was lying about being fine. "You were stuck with me," I had said. Mason smiled. "Good." 3 weeks later, he was gone. No goodbye, I understood. No explanation that reached me. Just silence. A knock sounded at my front door, pulling me back into my kitchen. I froze with the dish towel still in my hand. Another knock followed, softer this time. Somehow I already knew. I crossed the living room and opened the door. Mason stood on my porch holding 2 coffees. His eyes met mine, and that familiar crooked smile appeared again. "I remembered your order," he said. Of course he did. 10 years of silence. And somehow he still remembered exactly how I took my coffee. I stared at the coffee in Mason's hand like it was evidence in a trial I had not agreed to attend. "Still 1 cream, 2 sugars?" he asked. "You disappeared for 10 years and opened with my coffee order?" Mason's smile faded. I figured hello was not going especially well. Against my better judgment, that almost made me laugh. Almost. I took the cup because refusing it somehow felt more dramatic than accepting it. "Thank you." "You are welcome." Then we stood there, separated by 3 feet of porch and approximately 1 decade of unresolved history. Mason glanced toward his new house. "I should probably let you get back to your morning." "Probably." He nodded, but neither of us moved. Finally, he said, "I know this is strange. Strange as finding a raccoon in your recycling bin. This is something else." That earned the smallest laugh. I hated that I still recognized it. I hated more that some part of me had missed it. Over the next 4 days, living beside Mason became an exercise in discovering how many times 2 neighbors could accidentally encounter each other. Monday morning, we reached our mailboxes simultaneously. Tuesday evening, a package meant for Mason appeared on my porch. Wednesday, my backyard sprinkler started spraying sideways like it had developed personal grievances, and Mason appeared at the fence holding a wrench. "Need help?" "I have it handled." The sprinkler immediately soaked my jeans. Mason pressed his lips together. "Do not." I did not say anything. "Your face did." 10 minutes later, he was kneeling beside the sprinkler head while I held the flashlight. It felt dangerously ordinary. That was the problem. Mason had always been easy to be around. My body remembered the rhythm before my mind gave permission. On Thursday night, a neighborhood power outage turned the entire block dark just after 9. I stepped onto my front porch with a flashlight and found Mason already sitting on his steps beneath the pale glow of a battery lantern. "You still hate thunderstorms?" he asked. Distant thunder rolled somewhere beyond the trees. I looked at him. "I never hated thunderstorms. You used to count between lightning and thunder. That was scientific curiosity. You hid under a blanket. Science requires controlled environments." Mason laughed, and this time I did too. The sound escaped before I could stop it. For a few minutes, the 10 years between us seemed to loosen. Then Mason reached beside his chair and picked up something small. "I found this while unpacking." He crossed the narrow strip of lawn and placed it in my palm. A faded blue guitar pick. My initials were scratched into one side with a safety pin. I had given it to him senior year after attempting to teach him 3 chords and discovering he possessed absolutely no musical talent. "You kept this?" I asked. Mason looked almost embarrassed. "Apparently." I closed my fingers around it. "For 10 years. He met my eyes. Some things were harder to throw away than I expected. The words settled between us. I looked toward his house, then back at him, and the question that had been bothering me since Saturday finally became impossible to ignore. Mason, why are you here? His expression changed. The humor disappeared first. Then he glanced at the house beside mine. You mean Portland? No. My voice came out quieter. I mean that house. Silence stretched between us. Mason took a slow breath. Ethan, you knew I lived here before you bought it. It was not a question. Mason did not deny it. He looked directly at me and said, yes. My stomach tightened. So this was intentional. Another pause. Yes. The porch lights suddenly flickered back on across the neighborhood, illuminating his face. Mason did not look away. I came here because there is something about the night before graduation that you never knew. What do you mean, something I never knew? Mason looked toward the dark street. Even though the power had returned and every porch light on the block was glowing again. Not tonight, he said. I actually laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. You moved 30 feet away from me after 10 years, tell me my entire memory is missing something, and then say not tonight. I want to explain it right. You had 10 years to practice. That landed. Mason lowered his eyes. I immediately wished the sentence back, which annoyed me even more. He deserved my anger. I was allowed to have it. But anger had always behaved strangely around Mason. It arrived sharp and left carrying memories. Suddenly, I was 18 again, sitting on the hood of his old Ford the night before graduation. The Oregon air had been unusually warm, and the neighborhood smelled like fresh-cut grass. Our graduation gowns were hanging inside my house because my mother had ironed both of them. Of course she had. Mason was practically family. California, I had said, staring at the stars because looking at him felt harder. Mason had received an offer from a college nearly 700 miles away. He had told me that night. Not weeks earlier when he applied. Not when he was accepted. That night. I was going to tell you, he said. When? I asked. From the airport? Ethan. No, it is fine. Seriously. Go. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You are acting like I am trying to get away from you. Are you not? Silence. That silence had followed me for 10 years. I remembered wanting to tell him everything then. That losing my best friend terrified me because best friend had stopped describing what he was to me a long time ago. That every future I imagined somehow contained Mason, even when I knew it should not. The confession rose all the way to my throat. You do not understand, I said. Mason turned toward me. Then help me understand. I almost did. Instead, fear won. Forget it. Ethan. Just go, Mason. His face changed. You do not mean that. I crossed my arms because otherwise my hands would have shaken. Maybe I do. After everything, you already made your decision. He stared at me for a long moment. I still remembered the porch light reflecting in his eyes. Fine, he said quietly. I should have stopped him. Instead, I gave him the sentence I would spend the next decade regretting. Then go. I do not need you. Mason climbed into his truck. The engine started. He drove away, and I stood beneath the porch light pretending I had not just broken my own heart. By the next afternoon, he was gone. His family said he had left early. I called twice. No answer. I sent 3 messages. Nothing. Eventually, pride turned into hurt. Hurt hardened into silence, and silence became years. Standing across from him now, I realized how faithfully I had preserved that version of the story. That is what happened, I said. Mason shook his head. No, Ethan. That is what you saw. I frowned. What is that supposed to mean? He looked at me with an expression I could not read. I came back the next morning. Everything inside me went still. What? Before I left town, I came to your house. No, you did not. You were not home. Mason swallowed. So I left something for you. My fingers tightened around the old blue guitar pick. Left what? His answer came softly. A letter. I stared at him. In 10 years, I had never seen any letter. A letter? I repeated, because apparently my vocabulary had abandoned me. Mason nodded. I put it through the mail slot beside your front door. We did not have a mail slot. The little brass opening next to the garage. That was for newspapers. Mason blinked. That explains why your mailman always looked confused. Under any other circumstances, I might have laughed. Instead, I stared at him while 10 years rearranged themselves inside my head. What did it say? Mason looked away. I would rather you read it. That might be difficult considering I never got it. I know that now. His voice softened. I did not know it then. The street had gone quiet around us. Somewhere nearby, a sprinkler clicked on. You thought I read it? I asked. I waited for you to answer. I waited for you to call. I did. My chest tightened. Twice, from California. Your number had changed. It had. My parents switched our family phone plan that summer, and I had gotten a new number before leaving for college. At 18, that had seemed completely ordinary. Now it felt like one more tiny hinge on which an entire decade had turned. Why did you leave so fast? I asked. Mason rubbed his thumb along the edge of his coffee cup. My father and I had a conversation after I got home that night. Something in his expression made me stop pushing. He knew how close we were, Mason continued. He had started asking questions I did not know how to answer. Questions about me? Questions about me. He took a breath. Ethan, I spent most of high school assuming I was straight because that was the easiest explanation. I dated girls. I liked some of them. Everybody expected my life to look a certain way, so I figured it would. His eyes returned to mine. Then there was you. My heart gave one hard, confused beat. Mason continued before I could speak. You were the part one could never explain. I told myself we were just close. Then that night, when you said I did not understand, I knew there was something you were not saying. I almost told you. I know. His voice was barely above the evening insects. And the truth is, I wanted you to. The world seemed to narrow to the space between us. Mason, that terrified me at 18. Not because of you. Because I did not understand what it meant about me. He looked toward his house. Boxes still visible through the windows. My father wanted me gone early. I let him make that decision because leaving was easier than figuring myself out. I swallowed. And later took years. Mason gave a tired smile. I learned that people are more complicated than the labels they inherit at 17. I learned that running away does not make a question disappear. Why did you never come back? Because I thought you had read my letter. His answer came immediately. I thought you knew what I was trying to say and chose silence. I almost laughed at the cruelty of it. I thought you chose silence. I know. We stood there looking at each other. Two grown men discovering that our younger selves had spent years waiting on opposite sides of the same misunderstanding. Then a memory surfaced. My mother standing in my old bedroom last Christmas, pointing at 3 dusty storage boxes. College things, she had called them. Stuff we cleared out of the garage after graduation. I looked at Mason. The garage. What? My parents packed everything from that garage when I left for college. My pulse quickened. Those boxes are still at my mother's house. Mason went completely still. And for the first time in 10 years, I realized his letter might not have disappeared at all. I drove to my mother's house the next morning with the strange feeling that I was about to meet a version of myself I had spent 10 years avoiding. She still lived in the same 2-story house where Mason and I had practically grown up, 20 minutes across Portland, with the same white porch railing and the same wind chime that had somehow survived every Oregon winter since 2009. Mom opened the door before I reached it. You look worried. Good morning to you too. I am your mother. I can tell. I asked about the storage boxes. She pointed toward the garage without questioning me, which was either kindness or preparation for questioning me later. Probably both. The garage smelled like cardboard, old paint, and summers the first had forgotten. 3 boxes sat on a shelf beneath my father's camping gear. College was written across one in my mother's handwriting. Ethan's room covered another. The third simply said miscellaneous, which was parental language for things nobody had the courage to throw away. I opened it on the concrete floor. Yearbooks. A cracked phone case. Graduation programs. A Portland Trailblazers cap I had accused Mason of stealing. Then I saw the envelope. It was yellowed at the edges, folded beneath an old newspaper, my name written across the front in handwriting I recognized instantly. Ethan. Just Ethan. My hands went cold. For 10 years, I had imagined Mason leaving without looking back. For 10 years, this envelope had been sitting less than 20 miles away. I opened it carefully. The paper inside was lined notebook paper, torn unevenly from a spiral pad. Mason's handwriting tilted across the page. I do not know how to say any of this out loud, and after last night, I am pretty sure I would mess it up anyway. I know you think I am leaving because I do not care. That is not true. I care so much that I do not know what to do with it. I keep thinking about what you almost said. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I wanted to imagine it. I do not know what this is yet. I only know leaving you feels wrong. I had to stop reading. The garage blurred around me. Not because the letter was a grand declaration. It was not. That somehow made it worse. It was 18-year-old Mason, uncertain and frightened, trying to be honest with words he barely understood. I sat there for several minutes with the paper resting against my knees. Then I drove home. Mason was outside assembling a wooden bench on his porch when I crossed the lawn. He saw the envelope in my hand and slowly stood. "You found it." I nodded. He did not ask what I thought. He did not defend himself. He simply waited. "I would have answered," I said. Mason's face changed. "Ethan, if I had gotten this, I would have answered." My voice broke slightly, and I hated how young it made me sound. "I spent 10 years thinking you left because being my friend had become too complicated." Mason stepped closer, then stopped, leaving the final distance to me. "I spent 10 years thinking you read it, and decided I was too late." I looked down at the faded paper between us. 2 teenagers. 2 assumptions. 10 years. We were idiots, I whispered. Mason gave a small, sad laugh. "Historically impressive idiots." I laughed too, and somehow that hurt less than crying would have. Then Mason's expression softened. "For what it is worth, I am sorry." I looked at him. "For leaving? For not coming back sooner?" The morning breeze moved through the maple trees between our houses. I folded the letter carefully. Understanding the past did not erase it. It did not return 10 years. But for the first time, I was no longer angry at the story I had invented. Now I had to decide what to do with the truth. The truth turned out to be easier to understand than to live with. For the next 3 days, Mason and I existed in a strange new territory where neither of us was angry enough to stay apart, but neither of us knew what being close was supposed to mean anymore. On Wednesday evening, he appeared at my door wearing a navy sweater and holding absolutely nothing. No coffee. No package accidentally delivered to my house. No broken sprinkler requiring suspiciously convenient assistance. "Dinner," he said. I stared at him. "Is that a question?" "Yes. You should probably phrase it like one." Mason sighed. "Ethan Parker, would you have dinner with me? As neighbors." His expression became careful. As 2 people trying to figure out who they are now. That answer was annoyingly good. An hour later, we were sitting in a small neighborhood restaurant 6 blocks away, and for once we did not spend the entire evening excavating high school. I learned Mason worked in commercial architecture. He learned my freelance illustration business was doing better than my mother apparently told everyone. He had lived in San Diego, Denver, and Chicago. I had stayed in Oregon except for 4 years of college in Seattle. He still hated olives. I had finally learned to cook. "That might be the biggest plot twist of the decade," Mason said. "I make excellent pasta. You once burned instant noodles." I was 16. Water was involved, Ethan. You somehow burned water. I laughed so loudly the couple at the next table looked over. For a moment, Mason smiled at me exactly the way he used to. Then the smile softened. I missed that. My laughter faded. "Mason, I know." He lowered his eyes. "Too much. A little. Okay." And he stopped. No argument. No wounded expression designed to make me comfort him. Just okay. That mattered more than I expected. After dinner, we walked home beneath streetlights glowing through the Oregon mist. Near my driveway, Mason's hand brushed mine. He immediately moved it away. 2 steps later, I reached over and took his hand myself. Mason stopped walking. "Do not make this weird," I said. "I am trying very hard not to breathe incorrectly." "You are already making it weird." His fingers closed gently around mine. There were no fireworks. No dramatic music. Just warmth, familiarity, and something new growing carefully inside both. We stood between our houses, exactly where so much silence had lived. "I need you to understand something," I said. "Finding that letter does not erase what happened." Mason nodded. "I know. I can understand why you left, and still be hurt that you stayed gone. I know that too." I studied his face. "You keep agreeing with me. It is unsettling. I had 10 years to become slightly less stupid." "Slightly. Let us not set unrealistic expectations." I smiled despite myself. Then Mason became serious. "I am not asking you to forgive 10 years tonight, Ethan. I am asking whether I can show up tomorrow." The simplicity of it caught me off guard. Not forever. Not some impossible promise. "Tomorrow." "Okay," I said. "Tomorrow." His thumb moved once across my knuckles before he let go. I walked toward my porch, but my phone buzzed before I reached the door. An email notification filled the screen. The subject line made me stop cold. Seattle Creative Group. Senior Illustrator Offer. I opened it and stared at the salary, the benefits, the start date, and one requirement that changed everything. 3 days a week in Seattle. Behind me, Mason called softly, "Everything okay?" I looked across the 30 feet between our houses and realized the past had just found a new way to repeat itself. This time, I might be the one leaving. I did what any emotionally mature 28-year-old would do after receiving a career-changing offer while reconnecting with the man who had once disappeared from my life. I avoided making a decision for 48 hours and reorganized my kitchen cabinets. Twice. By Friday, every coffee mug had a designated location, my spices were alphabetized, and Seattle Creative Group was still waiting for an answer. The position was everything I had worked toward. Better projects. Health insurance. A salary large enough that I could stop calculating whether every freelance client might suddenly vanish. The only complication was that Seattle was roughly 175 miles away, and 3 days in the office meant spending part of every week there. 10 years ago, Mason had been the one with somewhere else to go. Now the universe had apparently decided symmetry was funny. I told him Saturday morning. He was assembling shelves in his living room when I knocked. "I got a job offer," I said. His face brightened immediately. "That is great." "In Seattle." The brightness paused, but it did not disappear. "Okay. 3 days a week in person." Mason set down the screwdriver. I waited for something I could argue with. A reason to stay. A flash of disappointment sharp enough to make my decision easier by turning him into the problem. Instead, he asked, "Do you want it?" That irritated me more than it should have. "That is your response." What response were you expecting? I do not know. I looked toward his half-finished shelves. Something. Mason studied me for a moment. "Ethan, if this is the job you want, take it. You bought a house next door to me." "I did." "You came back after 10 years. "I did that too." "And now you are telling me to leave?" His expression softened. "No, I am telling you that I do not get to decide your life because I finally figured out mine." That silenced me. Mason stepped closer but left space between us. He had become strangely good at that. "I came back because I wanted another chance to know you," he said. "Not because I wanted you to build your future around me." I looked down. "This feels familiar." "I know. I hate that. I know that too." A small smile touched his face, then disappeared. But maybe familiar does not have to mean identical. 2 days later, I accepted the offer. The company arranged a furnished apartment near the office for my first month while I figured out commuting. On Sunday afternoon, Mason helped me load 2 suitcases and several boxes into my car. Neither of us said much. When the trunk closed, I leaned against it and looked at him. "You could ask me to stay." Mason took a slow breath. "I could, but you will not." "No." That hurt, even though I understood. Then he added, 18-year-old me thought caring about someone meant holding on as tightly as possible because losing them was terrifying. "I think I know better now." His eyes met mine. "If you go, I will understand. I just wish 18-year-old me had been brave enough to give you that same choice." I had no clever answer, so I hugged him. Mason held me carefully, like neither of us wanted the moment to become a promise we could not yet make. Then he stepped back. "Go be brilliant." That sounded suspiciously supportive. "Do not tell anyone." I got into the car. Mason stayed beside the driveway as I pulled away. In the rearview mirror, he became smaller until the street curved and he disappeared. The old version of me expected panic. Instead, somewhere north of Portland, I realized something that changed the entire shape of leaving. Mason had not chased me. He had not asked me to sacrifice anything. For the first time in our lives, neither of us was running away. We were simply choosing where to go next. Seattle lasted exactly 19 days before I understood that distance was not the problem I had spent 10 years believing it was. I liked the job. I liked the people. I even liked the tiny apartment the company had arranged, despite the refrigerator making a noise every night that sounded like an exhausted lawnmower. What I did not like was pretending my life had to exist in only one place. So I asked my manager a question, then another. By Friday, we had an agreement. 3 days in Seattle every other week, remote work from Portland the rest of the time. Apparently, adulthood occasionally rewarded asking for what you wanted instead of silently suffering and hoping everyone developed telepathy. 18-year-old me would have found this information revolutionary. I did not tell Mason I was coming home. Some instincts deserved to remain dramatic. It was raining lightly when I pulled into my driveway Sunday evening. His porch light was on. Mine was dark. For a moment, I stayed behind the wheel, watching rain gather on the windshield. 10 years ago, I had watched Mason disappear from this street. 3 weeks ago, he had watched me leave it. Neither moment had been the ending we thought it was. I crossed the lawn and knocked on his door. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Mason stared at me. "Ethan, that is usually what people call me. You were supposed to be in Seattle." "Technically, I am supposed to be wherever my laptop is." He blinked. "What happened?" "I negotiated." "You negotiated?" "Please tithe to contain your surprise." His smile appeared slowly. That same crooked smile. Only now it belonged to a man I was still learning, not a boy preserved in memory. "So you are staying?" he asked. "Sometimes." Mason waited. I appreciated that about him now. He no longer tried to finish my sentences. "I have been thinking," I said. "Dangerous. Do not ruin this." "Sorry." I looked at him, really looked at him. "I think 18-year-old me loved you." Mason went completely still. "Ethan, but I do not want to spend the rest of my life loving a memory. I want 28-year-old me to have the chance to know who you are now." His eyes softened. "That is all I came back for." I smiled. "Good. Good." Neither of us moved. The rain whispered against the porch roof while Mason looked at me as though he was waiting for something. But after everything we had lost by assuming what the other person wanted, he did not take that final step. So I did. I reached for his hand first, then moved closer until only inches remained between us. Mason's breath caught. "Ethan, this time, I did not hide behind a joke. You waited 10 years. You can stop waiting." His eyes searched mine for one quiet second, giving me every chance to change my mind. I did not. Mason lifted one hand to my cheek and leaned toward me slowly. When his lips met mine, the kiss was gentle, almost careful, as if both of us understood how much history had followed us to that porch. There was nothing rushed about it. No attempt to recover 10 missing years in a single moment. It was simply warm and real, and when I closed my eyes, I realized something I had not expected. It did not feel like finally kissing the boy I had loved at 18. It felt like kissing Mason now, the man standing in front of me, the man who had come back, stayed, listened, and learned how to give me room to choose him. When we separated, Mason rested his forehead lightly against mine. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then his crooked smile returned. Was that part of the negotiation? I laughed, my hand still curled around his. Different contract. Good terms. Still reviewing them. Take your time. And somehow those 3 words meant more than any promise he could have made. We stood there for another second until I laughed again. Are we seriously going to keep saying good? I had a better speech prepared, but you arrived 19 days early. I stepped forward and hugged him. Mason wrapped his arms around me, warm and familiar without feeling like the past. That difference mattered. Months later, we were replacing the old wooden fence between our backyards. Half the boards had warped through years of Oregon rain, and Mason insisted the entire thing was structurally offensive to him as an architect. By noon, most of it was gone. I stood beside him looking across the open grass between our houses. So what are we replacing it with? Mason wiped his forehead with his sleeve and considered the empty space. Nothing. Nothing. I think I am done building those. I looked at him, then at the 2 houses standing side by side beneath the afternoon sky. Separate homes. Separate lives. No wall pretending they could not meet in the middle. That evening, both porch lights came on as the sun disappeared behind the trees. 10 years had taught us what silence could cost. Now, when Mason reached for my hand, I took it, and neither of us let distance speak for us again.